Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Arthur Howell from 2 Cents Critic. Hey Arthur, thanks for speaking today.
Hello, yes, I'm Arthur, and I want to thank you so much for having me on. And yes, I'm the host of Two Cents Critic, which covers books, movies, and TV shows. Not just covers, but does reviews and recaps as well. I'm really trying to dive into them, give them breakdowns and guests.
I don't need to explain what the show's about now, but at the same time, so we'll go into that then. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of shows will specifically look at one of those. So you'll have a film review show, you'll have a book review show, or a television review show. Sometimes you have like pop culture shows. So what made you decide to make it multimedia essentially as opposed to the other? Did you do it because you just wanted to not be stuck with one subject, and if you wanted to go all over the place?
Well, basically, yeah, because I have always been interested in all kinds of media, just like books, movies, and TV shows, even when I was little, and I've always wanted to just give my reviews, my opinions, in some form of fashion. And I do consume a lot. Like I feel like maybe just lean just a bit more towards books and movies, but definitely TV shows, consuming those. And I think that also does translate over to the podcast. Like I think if you go to podcasts, I think you would definitely find more episodes covering movies and books compared to TV shows. Because I feel like because I always try to bring guests on and be like, hey, you want to cover a TV show or something like that? Because TV shows do take a bit, they take longer to consume than just a movie or a book. So I think that is why it is harder usually to do an episode on a TV show, because I have to also find a guest or multiple guests who are willing to commit to that. But in general, yes, I want to try to spread myself across all three fields.
Well, we're going to go to something now a bit earlier than we have in the notes, because it's strange because your show started one way and then it's changed in a big way, essentially. So it started as an AI voice, essentially, doing the shows, and that was like just that voice speaking on behalf of yourself, doing your reviews. And there were very relatively short shows as well. But then you changed that format, decided to be yourself essentially on the show, but also it became more of a show where it's not just you, it's other people as well and guests. And so what made you change? What made you first of all start the way that you started? And then what was the sort of like the eureka moment of you saying, oh, do you know what? I'd just rather be myself.
So for that, I'm gonna have to go back in time to when I did the blog, because the way this podcast started was on my blog, Two Cents Critic, which is still up, and it's not as nearly as active as it used to be. Like I don't really post on the blog that much anymore, but I'll do it, every once in a while. But basically, I had a blog, Two Cents Critic, and I always forget it. I know I started it either in 2018 or 2019. I always forget that for some reason, but back then. I started it back then, and then I was just writing reviews again, but books, movies, or TV shows on the blog, and then a few years passed by, and then I ended up finding out about this feature on WordPress, where it's like, oh, you can take these reviews or take your posts and translate them into podcast episodes by having this voice, like this AI voice read the posts. out loud. And so I was like, at that point, I was like, huh, that sounds intriguing. Let's try this. Let's try this out, especially because I had been thinking about podcasting sometime and for some time, especially as someone who I listen to tons of podcasts. So that was always on the brain. I was like, I'll get into podcasting sometime. And then at that point, it's like, well, you know what? Let's try this out. So I did the AI voice for the first few episodes with Ryan's the Last Dragon. That was my very first episode. If you go all the
Yeah.
way back, Ryan's the Last Dragon, which a movie that I still enjoy, by the way, very much. But uh, I did the AI voices for the episode, and then the Eureka moments. I feel like the Eureka moment happened probably just like maybe I don't know 5 episodes in or something like that. Was like eventually after doing this for a few weeks, I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm gonna have to eventually transition over to recording the podcast, by myself, like with my own voice, just like do a live episode. So eventually it transitioned over to that. And the first episode that happened where I was doing a live episode, not just the AI voice, that was Luca, Pixar's Luca. And another movie that I also enjoyed quite a bit, like very warm-hearted movie, and I did my first live episode on that. And then, as you were saying, having guests on, and that was also interesting because then it was like, well, I'm gonna do the podcast by myself. It's just like, that was my plan kind of from the start. I think I do it by myself, but also every once in a while, bring in some guests because I listen to a lot of podcasts and there were some hosts where I'm like, you know what, I feel like it would be really, really interesting to bring you on, just have some discussions on books, movies, and TV shows. So eventually I would bring in more guests. I remember the first episode where I had guests on was an episode on the Prime Video sci-fi time travel series, The Smart War. And I had on Ryan and Tyler as my guests for that. They're over from Garbage Town and Dum
Yeah.
Dums and Dice, and very comedic, very funny shows. And that was a blast. And then eventually just brought on one more guest. And then once I got more comfortable with reaching out to guests, bringing them on, setting down a schedule, then I was like, you know what? Maybe it would be nice to have guests on for every episode. And now that's what I do now, which does come with its own obstacles every now and then when you do have to work in the schedule. Sometimes guests have to cancel, and you have
Yeah.
to shift things all around. So that does come with its own obstacles. But overall, it's been quite a fun ride, definitely.
I mean, one standout for me listening to the show was I really enjoyed one where you were just generally back and forth with your own mum and with your own mother, and you were sort of like you chose a subject, then your mother chose another subject, then you chose a subject, and you took it in
Right.
turns. And that was a fascinating episode to listen to as well because there's that natural rapport between you and your mother that's just shines through the episode. You can see the relationship that's there between you both.
Right, yeah, 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 that is definitely a standout episode because I feel like it breaks away from the formats I usually have. And I think I have a very specific format for my show. I'm just like, as a person, I just like to keep things structured that way. Helps to, keep things a little more predictable. It's like, yes, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. So usually I just have like introduce my guests, then we'll have we'll offer our thoughts and opinions, then give our score, then do a plot breakdown, then do a recommendation, and then promote where people can find us. That's usually the general structure. But for this episode that you just brought up, yeah, it was just more
Yeah.
more of a conversational format. Like we brought in we went into it knowing like, hey, let's bring in a few topics, we'll talk about them. And that's what we just went off those topics. And that was fun to do, definitely. Just have this conversational back and forth. And it happened times because normally I just do like the movies and books and TV reviews, but there have been times when I'm like, could I do like a side series on a podcast where it is just more conversational, like maybe maybe it's just like regular old banter, maybe like something you'd hear on, I don't know, like Rooster Teeth, as an example, like just like Rooster Teeth, like just conversations about everyday life. Or could it be like news? Could it be like movie news, TV show news, book news, stuff like that. I've always been like, should I do a side series on that? But maybe sometime in the future, maybe sometime. But for the most part, it is going to be the structured format. But again, the conversational flow, I do love that. Yes.
I'm wondering if your friends now, if you go to the cinema to watch a film, will your friends fear that they'll come back to your house to, just have some time after being at the theatre, and they'll be worried that they'll come in and find a load of microphones on a table waiting for them to discuss the film?
No, it's not usually like that. It is just like well, because here's the thing. I feel like the friends that I would be like in my own friend circle, I I have actually brought some of them on the podcast in the past, just to have like these discussions. But I don't think they'd be hesitant. Let me just say that I don't think they'd be hesitant, especially as like a movie fans themselves, like very like cinephiles. I don't think they'd be hesitant. We even have a lot of the fans I have, like we're in a film Discord server, and so we'll have lots of discussions. So, if anything, I feel like they'd be eager, to jump on and offer their opinions.
Yeah, because I know when I've been to watch films with friends and with my own with Louise, my other half, one of the best things I find is that a film has hit you in the right place when afterwards there is so much discussion between you and the people that went to see the film, and it's those conversations after the film that sort of like heighten the whole experience of going to watch films with people.
Definitely. I love those discussions as well. And it's funny that we'll talk about this because actually earlier today I saw Oppenheimer in
Okay.
theaters with my mom. And so that was nice to, it was not just nice, it was great. I loved the movie. It was, great to see it in the theaters. And then my mom and I were discussing it afterwards. So that was really fun and just like, oh, in general, like the movie was like, I loved it. It was a very, viscerally emotional. It's a phrase that keeps popping into my head when I think about how I feel about the movie. But in general, yeah, after movie discussions, or even like not even just in theater, but also with my girlfriend, we will stream a lot of movies together, and afterwards, it's always nice to have discussions with her as well, and like, hey, what do you think about the movie? All of this good stuff.
So you've already said that you have a structure to the episodes. So you're able to explain that structure, and what sort of research do you do leading up to each episode?
Mm. So for the research, it depends. Like the details of the research itself usually depend on whether it's book, movie, or TV show. Was just in general, the research will just be consuming the content, whether it's watching a movie or TV show or reading a book, taking notes. And for me personally, I take lots of notes. I'm just very detailed in that fashion. So when I'm just consuming content, I'll just take, notes on what's happening, in the plots and the other side thoughts that I have of what's happening. And that's why usually like I even have like in my lab I've got the iPad right here, and I
Yeah.
usually take some notes, and the notes can be quite long, quite long. And also just looking up background information on what I've been watching or reading as well, just to collect anything else. So if anything, like for a movie, let's just say for a movie, just go on Wikipedia, just do some general superficial research that way. Just Google and then do some more Googling to try to learn any other trivia about the movie, maybe any behind the scenes details. Sometimes I also like to I also definitely do research for a movie again for a movie specifically, or even for a TV show as well, or I guess for a book for authors. I always do research on the people as well. It's like for actors or for directors, authors, writers, screenwriters. Just in general, look up the credits, see what connections they have to other pieces of media, so I can also introduce any of those facts into the episode. In general, try to keep things comprehensive as possible.
So you've done all the research, you've got the structure there, and so how do you then record and edit the show?
So for that, when I'm recording, I use Zencaster. Zencaster has always been, well, I guess not always. I was gonna say it's always been reliable for me, but I would say most of the time it's been reliable. There have been the times when Zencaster just decides to conk out, and it's like, oh crap, oh why? But no, technological stuff. Before that, I did use Zoom, and Zoom. I used that, but then oh no, it's now it's like, oh, if you use the free version of Zoom, which I only have the free version, not the pro version. If you have the free version, you have to deal with a 40-minute time limit. So that's when I was like, oh no, I guess I gotta switch over to Zencaster now. But for the most part, Zencaster again has been pretty reliable. And then for editing, now that is a process that I have become quite familiarized with. Just editing in GarageBand, trying to take out like any dead space, any stutters, any ahs. Especially for me, it's I've grown accustomed to hearing my voice when I'm editing by now. So like, and I know what I say. I know when I stutter too much, or for some reason I say and a lot, like and don't just drag out the and. So I do try to cut those out. I don't cut everything out because I do want it to have some kind of like natural human speech in there. But for the most part, I do try to cut out the extraneous noises or dead spaces, dead air, and because of that, it can get quite lengthy. Sometimes an episode could take, I don't know, 6 hours maybe to edit. It's a lot of work, but I do like it's worth it because I do want the episode to be as seen as possible to listen to, and also it does make me cringe to think about that because when I was starting the show, when I was starting to record it live, I actually made the mistake of not editing the episode. It doesn't even occur to me that editing was necessary, or like
Yep.
the intensive editing. Maybe I did some editing here and there, but not nearly as intensive as I once did. But then, I forget at which specific point, unfortunately. But at some point in the podcast, definitely before 2022 ended, maybe like in the middle of 2022 or earlier than that, maybe. I don't know. But sometime I was like, you know what, I should really focus more on the editing, make the episodes as clean as possible to listen to. So that's why it makes it a little painful to think about the early episodes and be like, oh, like, because I haven't listened to them. I don't want to listen to them and just like, I feel like it'll be a bit painful. But it's like, oh, how is it to listen to those earlier episodes? Like how was it editing wise? It's like, oh no, is it kind of painful to listen to the stutters and stuff? I don't know, but at least now is editing wise, again, I'm scrupulous about that.
I used to be really meticulous and probably over the top with editing when I started, but now I take out some stutters to a certain degree and some ahs and what was it? Somebody mentioned to me recently that I say the word "so" a lot, and now when people point these things out to you, you can't help but notice you're doing it, and you try to take it out. And you're like, no, I don't need that in there. But yeah, I'm not quite as harsh with it now because I found that if I overdid it like I did back then, I used to spend days and days editing, literally, and I thought it doesn't actually sound very natural if I do it too much because it's like rigid, almost musical, and it's staccato in a sense. It's like do, and it follows a beat when people speak, and you find it's too structured in a sense.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the thing. That's why I do, like I said before, I do try to leave some of it in, but I don't know. And then I do think maybe am I being a bit too scrupulous about it? I probably am. I probably am, but I don't know. I just I'm very meticulous in that fashion, and just like sometimes like just sort of leaving certain sounds in the episode, it'll be like, it's just like it's just tricking away to my brain. No, no, no. But I don't know. Maybe I'll loosen up someday. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But in any case, that's the way I have it right now. Maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know.
So, how do you choose what you're going to speak about?
So for that, I always I actually have a list of in my notes app of what I want to cover. Just things like, hey, all these movies and books and TV shows, what I want to cover. And usually the way I do it is pretty much just purely like what I'm interested in. Because if you listen to my show, I do a lot of, different stuff, some like maybe romance or action, maybe some science fiction, lots of stuff. And I just, do what interests me because I feel like my tastes are quite omnivorous that way. And so that's why I'm always just like, oh, put it down on the list. Like for example, like Paddington has been on the list for a while. I haven't done that yet, but I want to someday. Or Toy Story, Crazy Rich Asians, and or like the Timeless. That's a time travel TV show. But on my list for a while now for TV shows. It's just lots of different stuff like that, and it's always kind of put it onto the list, and then when I reach out to guests, offer these options up to them and offer. I usually do like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 options to the guests I reach out to and be like, hey, these options. What do you think about them? Which one do you want to pick? And that's how we usually come down on them.
I was very surprised with by Crazy Rich Asians. I really enjoyed that film and didn't think that I was going to enjoy it as much as I did.
That was a really fun movie. I feel like in my whole gallery of rom-coms, I feel like Crazy Rich Asians is definitely one of my favorites. And it's funny because I've read the first 2 books, and I haven't read the third book yet, but I want to. It's on my TBR pile. And then there's the movie. I enjoyed the movie and the books as well. But it's funny because the books have a different tone from the movie. The movie is the tone is very much set up as your typical rom-com style, but the book is much more of a biting satire, more like a dark comedy kind of tone. So it's interesting to see how that tonal shift was executed. But I think it was handled well. Again, I enjoy both the book form and movie form, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. Hopefully the sequel, it's handled well.
I hope so. So, how do you decide which guest that you're going to have on the show, and how do you get them onto the show?
So for that, usually it is a good mixture of podcasts that I just listen to regularly, and then also a mixture of podcasts where I haven't listened to them before, but then I end up finding out about them, whether it's on, maybe social media, maybe they like pop up on Spotify, maybe there'll be a page like, oh, podcasts like this other podcast that you listen to. And then the podcasts pop up, and I look at maybe I look at cover art, I look at what episodes they've done, or maybe I look at the social media, and I'm like, this looks like an interesting podcast, maybe to bring on, and then I'll check them out, listen to a bit of the show and see like, hey, could our vibes mesh? Do the hosts sound like people who would be able to have some good old discussions on Two Cents Critic. And so, and also it could be podcasts of really any kind. Again, my tastes are omnivorous that way, not just with books, movies, and TV shows, but also podcasts. So it could be any kind of podcast. It could be like a podcast that does movies, books, TV shows. It could be a podcast that's just about conversations, maybe it's just banter. It could be a podcast about maybe what they're talking about, maybe music, or just any sort of podcast like that, or maybe a podcast about video games, whatever, or just pop culture, maybe geekery, maybe a podcast about sex, just any podcast. It's been, I'm open to all options. And then once once I got that down, once I have a guest where I'm like, hey, let's see if I can bring you on, I will reach out to them. Usually, but these days, it's usually DMs through Twitter or Instagram. I feel like those are usually the best options. I have also emailed the podcast directly if they have the email presence, and usually I do try to use social media first, but email is also a good secondary route as well, and just reach out to them and be as professional as possible. Just be like, hey, lay it out. Be like, hey, I'm Arthur Howell, the host of Two Cents Critic. If you're interested on doing an episode on a book, a movie, a TV show, reach out to me. Let's see if we can get something cooking. And then usually, I feel like to rate the percentage of people who respond compared to people who don't respond, usually it's about 70-30. I feel like 70% of people responding, which I feel like is pretty good. Yeah.
You've sorry, I keep doing this every time I have guests. I'll suddenly think of an idea and I'll think, and I just, while you were speaking, I was thinking, I had in my head, I thought Wall Street and all these other films, that are to do with like business, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could have like do a film on one of those, do a show on one of those films or a book that's related to, and get somebody from, say, a business podcast or a podcast about finance on to discuss their thoughts on the film, but also get their real life experience, sort of explaining where the films maybe got it right and maybe where it's a bit not quite there as well. I just have this strange idea there of you speaking to people who do whatever the film's about, do shows with those people all about the films, maybe, or the TV shows or the books.
Okay, so it's funny that you do bring that up, because actually there is an episode like that it's the first one that pops in my mind. Is I did an episode on The Roommate by Rosie Danan, which is a contemporary romance novel. And I just want to say, am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Go on.
Okay. Because the guest I brought on was Ruin Willow of Oh Fuck Yeah, was Ruin Willow. And I was sitting because she does like a erotica on the podcast and publishes her own erotica, and that was fitting with The Roommate, because it's a podcast, just as a book, The Roommate by Rosie Danan. It's a romance novel that does deal with the porn industry and sex work. One of the leads is a porn star. And so I feel like that is a situation that is fitting with what you're talking about, like bringing in someone who has knowledge about this specific field and is able to give their own insight on how it's executed. The book is, by the way, it's really made by Rosie Danan. I enjoyed it very much, and I did enjoy how the guest was able to bring in her own insight on the book. But yeah, so I feel like there aren't any episodes like that, unfortunately, that jumped out to me. Was like, yes, you have the specific insight on this field, but yeah, I enjoyed for the Roommate. I enjoyed it a lot, and then Wolf of Wall Street. I should mention, I have not seen it yet, but it's on my watch list.
you could get the guys from DIY for Business on as your guest to discuss that, maybe.
Yes, yeah. That'd be really interesting, definitely.
Absolutely. So we've already touched on the from AI to reality. So entertaining surprises. You asked me what I meant about this. And what I meant by this was situations where you've gone into a film or gone to read a book or watch a TV show and it surprised you in one way or another. You know, you've gone to watch it and thought, wow, this turned out much better than I thought it was going to be. Or on the other hand, you've got the other side of it where you went in expecting something and you got something you really weren't expecting that way as well.
So one example that leaps to mind is Last Night in Soho, the Edgar Wright movie, because before going into that movie, I was definitely aware of how much hate it has gotten, and I was like, I know this gets a lot of criticism. I know that the third act definitely takes a direction that people don't like, but I went into it. I was actually watching it with a few friends on Discord. We were streaming it on Discord, and I ended up enjoying the movie a lot. And I guess that definitely counts as a big surprise. Where it's like, oh, this movie was actually quite enthralling. I would say yes. Like not as flawed. Again, I do see why people hate what the third act turns. I think I was able to forgive the rough writing of that third act because of how the movie had progressed before that. Like I just love just like how mindfuckery it was, like how and the horror tone and the twists and turns, the cinematography, the music, the actors, performances. I think so much of that was so compelling to me, so riveting that I was able to forgive the writing in the third act. And so that was definitely a good surprise there. I feel like if we're gonna go to the other end of the spectrum, what also pops to mind immediately is Blade Runner 2049, which I know people love. I know people love it a lot. You know, it's like, oh, one of the most beloved movies in Hollywood. But then it's like, oh no, after I saw it, I was like, I don't really care for this movie, aside from a few aspects of it, where it's like I love the visuals, like visually is amazing, cinematography is amazing. But I didn't
Ridley
really
Scott.
care. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, here's the thing. I actually love the first movie. The first movie is really
Oh
good.
yeah, because it's not Ridley Scott for 2049, is it? No, of course.
No, it's Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. So, Blade Runner, the first movie, I actually did love that. Quite good. But the sequel, again, it's like I didn't really care for the story. Just didn't like the first act had me compelled, but then after that, it's like I don't know, it just didn't get me emotionally invested in it. I also I thought that it was quite misogynistic. I don't think the women characters get left out all that much, and I had criticisms about that. Like some elements was like, oh, this feels very male gazy. There's like one specific scene in the movie where I compared it straight to a scene from Her, and it's like these two scenes, like the scene from Her, is handled with so much more fleshed out emotion compared to this exact same scene in 2049. And I just didn't. I don't know. I keep thinking of 2049 as like one of the most overrated movies in Hollywood. Again, that's my personal opinion. So if anyone is listening to this and you're a huge Blade Runner 2049 fan, hey, you know what? You can love the movie. That's your valid opinion. Me, I think it's overrated.
So, are there any other standout episodes of your show?
Hmm. Standout episode, definitely. I think I feel like you were bringing up the one with my mom, just the conversational, just like bringing up some topics and news back and forth. I feel like that is a good one, just because of how it does stand out from the format, and also the episode I did with Tori from the podcast Ready to Be Petty on everything ever all at once,
Yep.
and that is a great episode. I mean, I'm saying it's a great episode. Maybe that's a bit inflated. I don't know, but it's my own show. But whatever. I still think it's a standout episode, and that was really fun to talk about it with her. The movie and my favorite movie of 2022, which not an original opinion, but still, my favorite movie. And that episode is, I think, almost 3 hours long, if I recall correctly, or 3 hours. It's somewhere around that range. We had a lot to discuss on that movie. And another notable episode is one that I did for my second anniversary of Two Cents Critic. And it was back in March, second anniversary, and for that one, I actually brought on multiple guests. It was like almost like a reunion of like multiple Two Cents Critic guests who had come on in the past. We bring them all in to do some trivia games. And so that was really fun to just have some fun, play some trivia, answer some questions. And it was nice to have a camaraderie between everybody on the show. Also, it was a bit cumbersome, I would say, just scheduling everyone in. Like having to figure out the schedules, have everyone in the same Zencaster room. So there were some points I'm like, wait, can my computer handle this? Because my computer can get weak sometimes. So it's like overloaded. It's like, oh, can it handle all of these guests, like all of this electronic activity? But yeah, that's another standout episode.
I had the very same nervousness last year because last year was the 60th anniversary of Dr. No, the first Bond film with Sean Connery. And so I thought, oh, as a Bond fan, I thought, oh, it would be great to get different people from different Bond or James Bond related podcast and spy related podcasts together. And then I thought, oh, well, we'll have a small group together. And then suddenly I had all these people joining the conversation. And I thought, oh, my God, I've got 10 people in this conversation.
Oh, 10. Oh, my God.
And look, it's lucky, really, that Zencaster gives you separate feed for everybody as well. And it's clean as well.
Yes, definitely.
Because it comes from everybody's, accounts. But even then, it was almost a nightmare in a sense because of that many people being involved. But at the same time, it was it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, just to go back to what you said about 10 people, like, oh, I didn't even have that many people for the trivia episode. I just had, I think, maybe 7, if I recall correctly. Well, actually, it started out at 7, but a couple people ended up having a drop out over time because of time issues. So it went down a couple people, but still, oof, 10. But yeah, it's just like you were saying, yeah, just it was fun, And I agree, it was fun just like having people on, and just having our vibes all combined, getting some jokes, getting some tangents. Yeah, it was quite a blast. And in the future, I would like to do something like that again. I would definitely like to. I don't know how I do that though, because like for this specific format, I just had it for the trivia for the second anniversary celebration. So I felt like, okay, this is a proper event to have all of these guests come in. So I don't know if I'll have like another trivia thing in the future. Could I bring in multiple people for discussing something? I don't know, like what you're doing with Dr. No. I don't know, but it's definitely something I want to repeat in the future.
Absolutely. I'll let you into a secret as well. Well, a few people know about this now. I've said it before. But with that James Bond episode, there were certain times where people would speak over each other. And I was listening, I was thinking, what that person said is interesting, but you can't hear it with all the voices there together. So I ended up doing a bit of smart editing there. So what I ended up doing was I ended up keeping all these bits that were spoken over each other and just extended the conversation. So you do hear these bits, but you don't hear them over the top of each other. And I just made it carry on flowing in editing. It was a longer episode than it was when it was recorded.
Okay, yes. I'm glad you brought that up because I have had used that very same tactic myself. Not even just on the trivia episode, which I did do it for that because again, not the voices, and but it was not only just that, it has been done. I've had to execute it on other episodes as well, just because each of these episodes was like, I think have I ever had an episode aside from the trivia episode? I'm just trying to think back because I don't think I've ever had an episode where I've had three guests on aside from the trivia episode, unless I'm forgetting something. But usually it's just two guests on. But yeah, it's just like, just gotta, as you're saying, expand it, keep the conversation flowing, because I do want everyone, I want the voices, to be heard. And although I won't say sometimes it is tricky. Just gotta, you gotta be careful about it. Gotta be careful about it because if you arrange things where it ends up not making sense, if someone says something and someone else says something else, because like with editing, sometimes it's like, wait, why does this person say this and then that other person says something else? It just doesn't flow together. So I have to be careful about that.
And now it's a bit more tricky now because I have to put video together for going on YouTube as well. So that would be difficult to edit now because wouldn't work with the video element. So what have I got next? Set life plan for media. Right. So what I mean by that is, do you so everybody has a work and time out of work schedule essentially, you're at work for this time and that's your home life and whatever. So do you have an actual plan for how much time you spend watching television, watching films, reading books, or is it just something that you naturally do anyway without having to set a plan? And do you also set a plan for when you're going to write your notes as well?
So for that, I do again try to keep it structured. I usually do have a plan of watching my movies and or TV shows and or reading books. Uh, it's not like it's not strict enough to be like, okay, I'll do it at this like in this specific chunk of the day, in this specific bit of time. It's not that strict usually, but it is more like a general like, hey, today I'll be squeezing in two movies, or hey, I'll be squeezing in some time to read books sometime in the afternoon. Maybe I don't know which part of the afternoon, but sometime in the afternoon. So that kind of general scheduling. And then for notes, usually, so for the notes, that actually happens usually as I'm consuming the content. So if I'm reading a book, I'm just taking the notes as I go along through the book, as I'm reading through the chapter and just, hey, okay, this is happening, this plot point is happening. I'll go back to notes, take the notes. Just or someone says there's quotes that I want to make sure I keep into notes, maybe to quote it on the podcast, I'll, copy and paste that over to the notes. And I feel like that process, I feel like that describing a process like that, it sounds like it could be jarring to do that. Maybe it could break the flow, but for me personally, I've been okay with it. I've just like, it doesn't break the flow for me to just like read something or watch something and then take, pause for a bit just to take some notes as I'm going through the content. I've been okay with it personally.
So let's have a look. Book, film, music. Well, not music. Book, film, TV. You can include music if you like. What would you say is your go-to for each, or your one that is your favorite of each? Sort of like your favorite book, your favorite film, favorite TV show, or that you would go back to.
So are you asking specifically for like genre or for any specific titles?
Maybe a specific. I don't know. It's up to you whether you go for a genre or for a title. It's up to you, really.
Well then, in that case, 'cause I've got some options, but I suppose let's say for genres first. I want to say for genres first. If we talk about genres, I find that if we talk about movies, I find that yeah, thriller and or sci-fi
Yeah.
it tends to be the things that'll grab me first for movies. Just like a few examples, maybe like Inception or Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind,
Yeah.
another favorite movie of mine. Her. Not to say that I don't enjoy movies from other genres. Again, I'm never as tastier, but we're just focusing on thriller and sci-fi. That's those are the first options that pop up in my head.
Yeah.
And then for TV shows, I feel like TV shows I'm more uh I'm broader on. That being said, I guess for TV shows, I do enjoy me some good old like maybe some like some Frasier. Frasier is a good example of like just a TV show that I really enjoy, or other TV
Yeah.
shows like The Good Place, Ted Lasso, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I want to say Seinfeld because I really enjoyed Seinfeld, but I haven't seen Seinfeld in a while. But I'll still show that in, and I feel like I should be rewatching that sometime. Anime. I actually do enjoy a lot of anime as well, and I actually just rewatched Death Note,
Yeah.
and I did a full podcast on Death Note, so that was really fun to do. And then for books, I feel like in that case, I feel like uh, yeah, romance. I feel like romance and science fiction, romance and or science fiction, is where the books hit for me. Uh, with maybe thriller kind of like landing just below those two. Maybe thriller leaning more towards science fiction because I do enjoy me some good old sci-fi thriller novels like Recursion by Blake Crouch. That's a very good one. And I actually have that on docket. A friend of mine will be coming on the show sometime in the future. He's still reading the book, but we're doing a podcast on Recursion. So looking forward to that. Other books, I feel like The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. That's a
Yeah.
favorite of mine, a romance novel, which I did a podcast on that. And The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which isn't really sci-fi, much more fantasy, but still like, fantasy, romance, fiction, I guess life fiction, I guess you could call it, because of the way it like expands the characters' lives, or literary fiction. But yeah, books like that. Gone Gold by
Yeah.
that's a good one. Gideon Flynn. Oh, that's a good one. A good thriller.
Um, I was going to do some put some of my own in there as well, but I mean, I quite like. I mean, but book wise, I like a lot of science fiction. I like I mean, I've said that Philip K. Dick, for instance, is a good ideas person with his stories.
Mm.
Ian Banks, some thrillers. I quite like some. There's some Lee Child books that I like, and there's some that I'm not too fond of. Film wise, very much science fiction. Although saying that, my favorite film of all time is Singing in the Rain.
Ooh, so someone watch this. Someone watch this.
But oh, what was I going to say? I read a lot of poetry. I like poetry books.
Ooh.
And television shows. My favorite TV franchise is Star Trek. But there you go. If anyone's interested in
Ooh.
what I'm interested in.
That's good. Yeah, Star Trek. I feel like I have seen a few episodes of Star Trek when I was little, but I haven't really consumed much of it. I will someday. I will someday. I feel like between the two, between like there's always like, oh, are you in the Star Trek or Star Wars? And I guess for me, I guess I do lean towards Star Wars, even if I have my own ambivalent feelings about where Star Wars has headed now, but still leaning towards Star Wars. And oh, I can't. I should. I forgot the name of this. Coco. Coco is definitely
Yeah.
a favorite movie of mine. In general, Pixar does some great work, but yeah, Coco is high up there, and The Incredibles. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I like the. Have you seen the Incredibles in the trailer? There were some fakes. There were some scenes that never ended up in the film, such as there's a scene with Mr. Incredible where he's in the bedroom putting the suit on or something at some point,
Oh,
And then his wife shouts, "Oh, do you want something for dinner?" And he's there and he can hardly fit into his suit. And he says, "Yep, maybe a salad." But that bit never actually ended up in the film. And when I
I
saw the film, I
remember.
was disappointed because I thought, where is that scene?
I remember that. Yeah, I completely forgotten about that scene now from the trailer. But now you're reminding me of it, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was an amusing scene. Oh, but that happens sometimes when you watch the trailer, and then sometimes the bits and pieces of it, maybe a line or maybe a whole scene, a whole bit that ends up getting cut out of the final product, which it's disappointing when that happens.
But the animators as well with some of these films, Pixar, they have a laugh as well at the same time because you'll find outtakes at the end of some of them as well, which obviously they've been filmed on purpose,
Yeah.
or they've been created on purpose. But those bits just add that little bit of magic to the films as well.
Yeah, it does. Those bits do make it a bit more immersive. It almost tricks you into thinking like, oh, these animated characters, this animated world that I've been watching, it's actually real. I feel like a Bug's Life is a great example of that. I've always loved the outtakes that roll through the credits for that movie, and it's general a great Pixar movie.
Absolutely. So, what other podcasts do you listen to yourself?
Oh, so many podcasts. I was gonna check through Spotify just to make that, just to see if any popped in my head. But I'm gonna say Opinionated Lushes. That's like
Yeah.
a drinking and banter show. I've actually had the host of that on my show a few times. I hate it, but I love it, which is a movie review podcast, and haven't had to post that on my show yet. But I would like to someday. New Game Plus, that is a video game review podcast, and that's also great. I'm actually a member of their Discord server, and so it's fun to be a part of that whole gaming community as well. Even as someone like I'm not an active gamer myself, but it's still fun to listen to the games,
You,
the game reviews.
you need to get them on to do Tron or one of the Tron films or something.
Yes, Tron. Yeah, Tron is a. I understand why people like Tron, but I don't personally like it all that much myself. I feel like it's very dated. But it's like, oh, this is a movie that definitely came out decades ago, and you can feel it with all of the CGI and all, and it's yeah, very dated that way. But oh
No,
well. But
carry on
oh,
with your list.
uh, oh, I should say Tron, Tron Legacy. I did have more fun with Tron Legacy though when I saw it. Like I think I was like 12 or something maybe when I saw it. But I had fun with Tron Legacy. I do want to rewatch it though, see if it still holds up. But going back to the podcast, I guess Horror Queers. That's a really good one. We Hate Movies, mostly nitpicking. Uh, I used to listen to Mad About Movies, but I haven't been keeping up with the episodes in a while though. But I think I should be getting back into Mad About Movies. That's a good show as well. But yeah, I feel like pretty good. That's a pretty good list. Oh, Ready to Be Petty, also there. And yeah, I feel like that's pretty good in terms of like, just a few of the podcasts that I listen to. And oh, Dating Kind of Sucks. Dating Kind of Sucks.
Yeah.
Podcasts just keep popping up into my head as I talk about this. But yeah, just a few of the podcasts I listen to.
So, what advice would you give to people starting their own show?
Oh, what advice? I I would definitely say when you're creating a podcast, definitely try to figure out, just what the hell are you doing? What's the format going to be? I'm not saying you have to be overly structured, because I do think if you do try to get too structured early on, it will, like to the point where it's like you're doing it too much, and it sucks some of the fun out of it. Then it's just like, why even doing this then? But I feel like go in with a good sense of what you're doing. Like what are you covering? how long do you think your episode will generally be? Is it just you, or is it gonna be you and a co-host or multiple co-hosts? Uh, are you gonna promote this on social media? And just, what platform are you gonna use? Like, for example, I host the hosting platform because I use Anchor. That's my, well, I guess didn't it change like Spotify, like podcasts that's for Spotify, I think it changed. I think Anchor
Yep.
changed into that. But yeah, just like figure out what hosting platform you're gonna use. Just, make a plan, figure out the general sense of what you're going for here. Once you have that set down, then I feel like you can jump into it and start the podcast, figure out how things will evolve, work out the kinks. Because obviously things will evolve. You'll figure out, okay, what works, what doesn't work. Just like with Two Cents Critic. Two Cents Critic underwent its own evolution, as you can hear when you listen to the episode. So
Yep.
that will inevitably happen. And just got to make sure to go with the flow as it happens, especially if you're trying to find guests, if you're the podcast, if you're the kind of podcast that does do that. And I feel like for my own show, definitely, as I was saying before, definitely got to overcome some obstacles when you're inviting on guests and you got to work out the scheduling. But, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Okay, and now the bit that people really need to listen to even more, because then they can make suggestions to you for things to check out and hopefully contact you to come on your show as well, offer to appear on your show. So where can people find you and get hold of you then, Arthur?
Yes, for that, you can find this podcast, my podcast, Two Cents Critic, on Twitter and Instagram at @2_Cents Critic. I've got a lot of personal accounts. My personal accounts are on Twitter, GoodPods, Storygraph, Letterboxd, and TikTok at Arthur_and18. And that's the number 18, number 18. And to specify for earlier, at @2_Cents Critic, that's the word two, spelled out TWO, and that's number 2. I'm also on Goodreads at Arthur Howell, and I can be emailed as well at email 2centscritic@yahoo.com, and that's the number 2. And I've got my blog at 2centscritic.com. And you can also just find my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, rate and review. On the Spotify, iTunes, GoodPods, all of those services as well.
I've thought this earlier on, and I've thought this a few times actually, listening to your show. And I can't believe that I've only just thought of saying this. So does the title of the show come from sort of like just the phrase of, oh, this is my 2 cents worth? Is that where it comes from?
That is correct. That is correct. I remember, it's funny because I feel like I'm actually not that great at coming up with snappy names, but I feel like that was just a moment where I was just like, okay, what name did I come up with? I know something snappy, something quick, something was like, hey, you look at this title and people can get a pretty good image of what you're going for. And I was just like, well, I like to give my thoughts and opinions. Again, even as a child, I knew I wanted to give my thoughts and opinions. I actually wanted a blog for a while. Again, as a child, I was like, I want a blog, I want a blog. And eventually I got a blog. So I was like, I want to give my thoughts and opinions. I want to give my 2 cents on the things I think about, on the things I consume. So at that point, I was like, well, 2 cents. And eventually, it's just like I was running through all the words because I love me some words. I'm like very like my brain's kind of like a dictionary in that way. And just I was running through all the words, the synonyms, and I was just like combining them together. And eventually, I just landed on like 2 cents, and then something to get like 2 cents reviews, 2 cents something something, and then I'm like, well, 2 cents critic. And then as I landed on that name and I thought about it some more, I was like, you know what? This sounds like an appropriate title. Again, snappy, short. You get the sense of it. 2 cents critic. And I just came up with that title, and then I should give credit to my mom, who also came up with the like she basically did the cover art because she got this app where she got this app and then came up with like the blue color and the wording on it. It's like 2 Cents Critic and the number 2, just the whole design with this app. And so that's how she was doing, yes.
The blue,
2
that's
Cents
my
Critic.
attempt at it.
Yep, 2 Cents Critic. Well, I mean, that's basically it. Yeah, basically right there. Even got the blue. He got the blue there.
I like the ornate number 2 as well. That's on the logo.
Me too. Even like because the apps that you're using, it did have different options for how the 2 could appear, and so we were just going through all of them, and that was the one that just like stuck out to us, we just really enjoyed it, and with the little circle around it too. The circle adds a nice touch.
It is. Anyway, you can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform. Well, you're listening to us, so you know how to find us. And we are on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads now, of course. And you can contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. I will never call Twitter X.
No. I'm not up for that either. No. Not Elon Musk. No.
No. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.